What's the deal with
Chapter Masters? Greetings to the 22.5 thousand grimdark enjoyers of my channel, and a friendly hello to the nearly 60% who haven't subscribed. This time I wish to talk about an aspect of the hobby I care about above all else. An issue which happens to be represented fairly well by Chapter Masters and their current state in Warhammer 40k 10th edition. And I suppose the thesis of this one would be, a lack of Chapter Masters is a lack of heart and soul. Though before we get into the thick of things, it would probably be useful to establish the context surrounding captains.
I'm the captain now.
Captain context. Earlier this week, I was posed a question during a live stream, and that question was, what keeps my hobby motivation going? And ultimately, my answer was, the creative opportunity this hobby provides, or technically, can provide. From an expression point of view, it's awesome to have a game system which facilitates an environment where you can set out to create an army, and name it X, define its themes to be Y, and build something uniquely yours. And that creativity is paid off when you put those models on the table and live the dream, simulating your creation's interactions with another player in the grimdark future's theater of war. Whether they be through house rules or counts as, that is a great payoff for a hobby. This brings us to the avenue of focus, Chapter Masters. Presently in 10th edition, there are no rules for one to field bespoke Chapter Masters in normal games of Warhammer 40k. Now, before I get any, but actually comments on this video, yes, I am aware that in Crusade there is a Chapter Master upgrade. However, there ought to be a system in place for one to build their list, take it to their local game store, and say, oh right, my Chapter Master is my warlord, without needing to have a preemptive conversation with their opponent that they'd like to incorporate some rules from the Crusade system to have a more narratively accurate abstraction for their Chapter Master. Wait, how many captains? This lack of any Chapter Master mechanics is made further awkward by there being 5 datasheets for the various types of captains. And the reason for this is twofold. In part, it's because the 40k rules writers want a simpler game that is easier to manage, for the serious business that is tournament play. 9th and especially 8th edition were criticized for having too much rules bloat, which is a fair point. Though I think a case can be made that we find ourselves in an environment which has been overcorrected, having lost some of its heart and soul. And related to that point is the other part of the equation. These 5 captains have datasheets because they are models which can be sold. GW has no Chapter Master product to sell us, and so there are no rules for Chapter Masters within the standard realm of play. Instead, you and your playgroup have to opt into Crusade, an additional mode of play which sits atop the foundational rules, a system which comes with its own set of disincentives, among which are ill-timed rule support for differing factions, and loads of tracking from game to game. And here is my very spicy, hot like the fires of Nocturne take. I think the rules writers have got it all backwards. Really, you want a core layer of rules with all the options, avenues for narratively appropriate upgrades like Chapter Masters, a proper suite of war gear options so that Chosen could, I don't know, choose to wield the weapons they desire, and for legendary units to be available without their negative stigma. I'd go even so far as to suggest this should include the wholesome converted units like orcs looted tanks. Ultimately, you want a core layer of rules which accommodates the options consumers bought into previously, and not one that punishes the hobby efforts and purchases of years past. And then there should be a separate system for organized tournament play, which implements the restrictions it requires, such as not allowing units which aren't presently being manufactured, war gear options limited to how products are sold, etc. But GW won't do that, because that paradigm would lessen the significance of tournament play, which of course must remain front and center. It seems to me the 40k rules writers are effectively audience captured by the more vocal, tournament-oriented base. Warhammer 40k
has changed.
It's no longer wholesome in its design, which allowed you to build your dudes, built with a rules philosophy in mind which encouraged your creativity, and to incentivize the creation of unique experiences to be shared in your playgroup. Which is a shame, as that is certainly the greatest unique selling point fictitious tabletop wargaming facilitates. Instead, we now find ourselves fielding units with rules relegated to the physical limitations of how products are sold in our world, rather than creating rules which speak to the realities of the world we're trying to engage with. A Terminator captain being unable to take a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield from the armory is beautifully demonstrative of this point, as is the lack of any rules for chapter masters. The fix. Thankfully, since we, the players, build the armies, build the tables, and operate the rules, we have the means to address such issues. And so I have two questions relating to how chapter masters ought to be handled in standard play. The first is in relation to stats. For sure, a chapter master should be a cut above a captain. However, captains are already at the skill ceiling. But there is design space to bump chapter masters up to a 2+ armor save standard. It's reasonable, as chapter masters would surely have artificer grade armor. And it nicely parallels the relationship between Calgar and the standard Gravis captain already, though all Terminators have a native 2+ armor save. And so, a Terminator chapter master needs a little extra something. What do you guys suggest that ought to be? And the second relates to abilities, where I'm less certain. Each of these captains have two rules, the standard ability common to all captains, and a unique one to help the various types of captains stand out. The simplest solution that comes to mind would be to just incorporate one of the two Crusade chapter master abilities, allowing one to choose to characterize their chapter master as either a tactical genius or a deadly combatant through these once per battle abilities. But is that sufficiently thematically satisfying? That's a wrap on this thoughts on chapter masters, and I suppose the state of 40k's heart and soul. If you enjoyed this video, there are buttons for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And special thanks to Julius Maximus, as well as my other generous patrons and channel members. Channel members and patrons get early access to videos. Just a little something for those who help keep the dream alive.
Save the dream!
Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch ya in the next one.